news story. In a recent Ames report, it was ranked as the top school in the Cape Breton-Victoria Regional School Board. Enrollment has also been increasing for 4 consecutive years. In short, Mr. Speaker, this is a school in which we as a province can take pride in. At this juncture, we should be celebrating its successes and trying to repeat them elsewhere, not closing it down. Ironically, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, there was an announcement for the construction of a new junior high school in the Premier's hometown. For the exact same number of students at the Premier's old junior high, his government is willing to spend millions, but not willing to do anything at all to preserve the learning environment for an already existing institution for a fraction of the cost. Mr. Speaker, this is old-style politics at its worst. It's shameful. Absolutely shameful. Shameful indeed. Mr. Speaker, letters of concern from parents, staff, students and alumni have been pouring into our office. The connection and pride they all have in their school is truly moving. And for them to be ignored by this government is unacceptable. It's certainly not a better deal for today's families.
Sure not. The bitter deal. Bitter.
Time is not on the student's side, Mr. Speaker, and it's not on the faculty's side. The status quo is unacceptable, and the minister and her government must do more to ensure that the learning environment for the students at Holy Angels is not further disrupted. Mr. Speaker, I urge the minister to reconsider her ill-advised decision and not turn her back on the present and future students of Holy Angels. I urge the minister to reconsider hers and her government's rejection today of an all-party meeting to discuss Holy Angels and to immediately provide the necessary support so that Holy Angels can remain a vibrant educational institution for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Education. Okay, the Minister of Education has given her time now to the member for Cape Breton South, so we will start the member from Cape Breton South has the floor.
All I can say, Mr. Speaker, is you tried. Mr. Speaker, I too, like the member from Victoria, is not happy. I'm not happy, and nor was he, to rise here this evening in my place and talk about the future of Holy Angels. And I have quite a history with Holy Angels High over the years. In my previous life as mayor in Sydney, I used to be quite active in events that happened at Holy Angels over the years, playing the role of lieutenant governor or sometimes speaker at their model parliaments. And I had the opportunity to observe firsthand what was going on at the school and the excellence that was ever present at Holy Angels. And I think certain things would describe Holy Angels to a T, and one is academic excellence, as been stated by the member previous, cited for that excellence. Also unique, and I think we would have to agree that it's certainly unique when you have a school, the only all-girls high school east of Montreal in the public school sector, is something that is unique. And I might say at the outset, Mr. Speaker, should be preserved. The high school spirit at Holy Angels is nothing short of phenomenal. You know, when you go down there, you can sense that they have a raison d'etre, I guess. They love their school. They love the fact that they're in a unique situation, an academic situation of not only excellence but esprit de corps. You know, they're not intimidated in that school. The young ladies that go there for a purpose, and they go there because they feel that it's their school, that their mothers went there or their peer groups went there. And I can tell you right from the principal of the school, Teresa McKenzie, and her staff, who are also very passionate about the school, as as I am, and as some of the other people who know the school and have sort of grown up in Sydney with the school, are equally passionate about something that is unique to the point where it's accepted as part of the tradition of the north end of Sydney, but yet it serves female students from all over Cape Breton Island. Some from your riding, Mr. Speaker, and some from the Cape Breton North, some from Glace Bay, some from the Cape Breton Centre, you know, all the ridings in Cape Breton. So everybody has an interest in Holy Angels, and I have never, over the years, heard anybody talk about the lack of excellence at Holy Angels. Quite the opposite. People have talked about the excellence at Holy Angels and how it should be preserved for many more years. I can tell you that the staff over the years, led today by Teresa McKenzie, have one aim in mind: to make the school even better than it was over the years, if that's possible. And I can tell you that the Congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame over the years, back since 1985, or 1885, pardon me, 1885, have brought the school to where it is today. And in regards to the sisters and the congregation itself, as you can appreciate, Mr. Speaker, they've done their job over the years. They've kept the school in rough times. They've kept it going when the school board wasn't even supporting Holy Angels way back in the early years of that school. The sisters did it, and the sisters did it well. And it's time for the sisters to pass that along, and they have passed it along to the public school system. But I would hate to see their legacy set aside. All the work that they did over the years to make Holy Angels as an excellent high school as it is today, I would hate to see people like Sister Agnes Cordeau and her people at the convent down there in the north end of Sydney have to sit by and watch the school go under. And that would be a sad day for the education system in Nova Scotia, that we have something here that's very precious. And I don't know whether the minister would agree with that, but I mean, we have something that's unique, we have something that's very precious, and we have something that if we lose it, we're never going to get it back again. And I can tell you that the young women that I've talked to, and they've called me an hour ago, I had 2 discussions with a couple of students there, and also all last weekend, and the concerns about the future of the school are uppermost in their mind. And they say that they go to Holy Angels for a reason. They feel very special at Holy Angels. They're not intimidated by guys in their classroom, for example, who, you know, they have that sort of independence where they can say and interact with the teachers there, and they have this ability to do that because they are in a unique situation. I wonder, my good friend from Cape Breton North mentioned it earlier, and I wonder what Sister Peggy Butts, Senator Sister Peggy Butts, would say if she was still around. Sister Peggy, of course, was a social activist in Sydney, as we all know, and for the betterment of Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, and indeed Canada. But she was an ardent supporter of Holy Angels High. And I think the government is fortunate that Sister Peggy is not around today, because Sister Peggy would be crashing through those doors coming in here, and somebody would have to haul her out of here if she didn't get her way. So, Sister Peggy, if you're listening, if there are still people down here that are Holy Angel supporters. Move on a little bit to what's been happening here and what's not happening. There was no comments made by anybody that I can recall in the past number of months about the concern about repairs to Holy Angels. It's only since the red flag has gone up about the closure of the school that these barriers have been put in place, perhaps to convince the government that they shouldn't chase the future with Holy Angels in terms of repairs and that, rather they should give up on it and let it close. I reject that, because we've done repairs at Sydney Academy. The previous government has allocated money, long-term money, over the years for the renovations of Sydney Academy, Riverview Rural High, and Bedek, and also some other junior highs and that in the area. So this business about the government can't afford $10 million, that was a figure that come out of the air There are projections made that over the next number of years, there may be $8 to $10 million need to be spent on the school over the long haul. And that's not something that's not doable. It is doable over a period of years. But in the meantime, the principal of Holy Angels tells me that the school is in relatively good shape and can continue next year and into the future. The school is not falling down. What is falling down here is the inability of the government to recognize the importance of Holy Angels and come out and say that they're going to save Holy Angels where it is and keep the uniqueness of an all-girls high school. It seems to me that we have precious little things in Cape Breton that we can boast about these days, but one of the things we can boast about is the fact that we have an all-girls high school, the only one east of Montreal, and that uniqueness should be kept. How much time do I have, Mr. 2 minutes? The question was asked earlier today and met with what I would call a disappointing response about the meeting of the stakeholders. I forget who asked the question now, but the government, or in a resolution, I believe it might have been, yeah. And I think it's incumbent upon the minister to sit down with the school board and the MLAs in the area. And don't forget, Mr. Speaker, we have 2 government MLAs here who have an interest in Holy Angels as well, including the Deputy Premier and yourself. You know, and I would hope that you too could use your wisdom and your political savvy, I guess, to convince your masters here that keeping Holy Angels would be the right thing to do. I believe that perhaps we could agree to all sit down in the same room and come up with some kind of a solution. But the solution right now only rests on the fact that the government has to buy the building. That's all that has to be done right now, is the government to buy the building from the Congregation of Notre Dame for perhaps less than $750,000 if somebody's a sharp negotiator. But they need the opportunity to get out of those buildings because they're moving on to another home, and the sisters are all getting up there and would like to spend their remaining years in some sort of secure situation which they're working towards. In the meantime, they don't want the problem with the buildings themselves down there because they're public buildings and for all intents and purposes and should be maintained and preserved by the public. Mr. Speaker, the government has the ability to keep Holy Angels unique and provide the resources to buy the building. The history of excellence and the tradition of Holy Angels must be maintained. I know that people in my community will settle for nothing less, Mr. Speaker, than to keep that school open. Mr. Speaker, and finally, the Sisters of Notre Dame have done their job over the years, and I think that the legacy of their hard work over the years should be maintained and even built on. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today and to talk about Holy Angels High School and to add my voice and that of government to the many others who have expressed their support and affection for this long-standing institution. Holy Angels has a rich history and it does a wonderful job of educating young women. And our government recognizes the positive role that the school has played in the lives of many students outside the province and indeed across the province and indeed outside Nova Scotia. And I've had an opportunity over the last 15, 16 months to meet many of the former students, and they speak very positively about their experience and their time at Holy Angels and talk about the wonderful opportunities that they were given in that very unique setting. Now, I'd like to just review a little bit of the past history of this situation because it strikes me that the provincial government is being given a lot of responsibility and focus on this that is not actually its responsibility. So I would just like to perhaps review a little bit of the past history to understand where we are at this point and who the decision makers are and where the decision points are. Now, it has been stated already that this is the only all-girls public school in Nova Scotia, and it was established by the Congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame 125 years ago. And currently, 299 girls, young women, in grades 10 to 12 attend the school. Now, the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board was advised in November 2009, last November, that the sisters would be closing the convent and the school building by June 2011. And at the time, the suggestion was made that the school could continue there for the 2010-11 academic year. But there was a lot of uncertainty about that, and I'm not sure that the board saw that as a viable option. Now, this is the point I want to emphasize. In response to the notice of termination of the lease, the board struck a committee in February 2010 to review options to continue the school. And the committee had a preliminary building assessment done, and that's where the figures are coming from, and I'll talk a little bit more about those later. Since last November, senior officials of the Department of Education have been meeting on a fairly regular basis, both in Sydney and in Halifax, around the future of Holy Angels. And department officials have offered every support necessary to get the study done, to review the options, and to help the board in their decision-making. And I just want to go on by saying that when the sisters announced that they'd be selling the school, this was a blow to the board. It was a blow to the school community. And I have to admit, I was disappointed to hear that news. I just want to say that in February, at the invitation of a number of groups affiliated with Holy Angels, I took the opportunity to visit the school myself. And unfortunately, weather conditions being what they were that day, that was very icy traveling conditions. And so the school for the students was canceled. However, I did meet with representatives of the Congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame. I met with representatives from the school board, the principal and staff. I believe there were some parents there, and also the chair of the school advisory committee. I was really pleased to discover that the chair of the school advisory committee actually was a former colleague of mine, Greg O'Keefe. And the year I was elected to the Dartmouth School Board, he was elected provincial president of the NSTU. And I hadn't seen him in many years. So it was interesting to see that we've kind of been recycled into other positions. But I certainly enjoyed reconnecting with him and meeting many of the other very strong supporters and advocates of that school. I wanted to see the school myself. I wanted to listen directly firsthand to the stories of achievement and plans for the future. I did have a chance, I believe, to meet a couple of students in other settings, but not that day. Now, since that visit, my staff have had several follow-up meetings with the board chair and the vice chair and the board itself. And our goal, as I mentioned earlier, has always been to help the board examine all reasonable options. Now, obviously, the board's preferred option was that the province purchase the building. I should mention that the sisters have been subsidizing the lease on the school building, and the provincial department has been paying the lease. But we realize that the sisters have been providing cleaning and other operating costs. We considered the board's request, but earlier this summer, either June or July, we did inform them. I believe the deputy and senior staff actually went to Sydney to meet with the board. The department informed the board in July that the province was not in a financial position to buy the building from the congregation. we cannot afford to purchase the building. And when we look at the financial pressures on public education across this province, it doesn't seem prudent to purchase a 50-year-old building when there are other options. And we already have many fine schools in that board area that have existing space that could potentially accommodate the students from Holy Angels, perhaps as a school within a school. Like many boards, the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board has excess space, and that's one of the options that the board has been considering. And apart from the purchase price, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the board's own engineering study determined that the cost of upgrading the building to modern standards would be between $8 and $10 million over the next number of years. Agreed, it's not something that would have to be done the next year, but they would be needed eventually. So what I want everyone to understand is that my priority as education minister and our priority as a government is making sure that the money we have for public education is invested as wisely as possible. And that means that the classroom, the relationship and the learning situation between the student and the teacher must come first. And I want to say that I want to thank the honourable members for Cape Breton Centre and Cape Breton Nova for their ongoing input and interest in this issue. And I want to close with a quote that was in a recent Globe and Mail article, quoting a student who I believe graduated just last year, Alyssa McDougall. And she was so eloquent, I would like to borrow her words. Her quote, what she said was, quote, "At the end of the day, the school is the people in it. This is Alyssa, I don't think it matters if we're in this building, another building, someone's basement, or sitting on the sidewalk drawing with chalk. This is a family, and if you move to another house, you don't cease to be a family." Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to rise and join in the debate this evening with regards to Holy Angels. And what the minister has failed to talk about is providing. It's great to talk about a house not being the home, but there has been no dialogue or direction with regards to where Holy Angels would be. But I want to say this. After 125 years, it's just not part of infrastructure of the community. It is part of the actual fabric of the community of Sydney, and it is composite of young women from all over the region. Of the 299 students that are currently there, 172 are from the Sydneyan area, which Sydney would take in Whitney Pier, as you know, Mr. Speaker. 127 come from other communities, and I just want to provide the numbers in terms of the uniqueness of this. Glace Bay and Reserve area have 28 students currently enrolled. Louisbourg, Catalone, Gabarouse, Marion Bridge area have 9 students currently enrolled. New Waterford, South Bar, River Ryan, Lingan area, where the Deputy Premier's from, has 33 members. My constituency, North Sydney, Sydney Mines, Bredor, has 37 young women attending. Sydney area, as I say, 172. And Westmount, Georges River, Millville, Point Edward area that includes both Cape Breton South and Victoria the Lakes has 14. As was indicated, so there is a composition. As I said the other day, and part of this is talking about, it's great that Alyssa had a great experience, but the young woman from North Sydney that takes 3 bus transfers going and 3 bus transfers getting home doesn't share that view because she hasn't had the benefit of seeing out her education experience, hasn't had the benefit of knowing that there is a future for her, and to be able to encourage other young women to look at Holy Angels, because, as was indicated, the only public girls' school east of Montreal with 125 years. And I don't think it's fair for people to say, well, the sisters are just getting out of the business. The sisters have provided of Notre Dame 125 years of service. And she talks about the department taking up the lease. Well, you needn't think that they've done a great favor to the sisters, because the lease is less than what the equivalent of an FTE would be. The lease cost that the province provides to the sisters is $40,000 a year. That's not an FTE equivalent in budgetary means. So the province and the school board has been getting a very good deal for the return. Now, what is not included is when they talk about 8 to 10 million, what I think the sisters could be warranted a payment for service to this province for that long would be much higher. When we look at how much, and what we haven't talked about is how much money have the sisters invested in that school, how much has our community benefited from that. And you know, as much as it might have been the Catholic school system and the Sisters of Notre Dame that have done it, Mr. Speaker, and provided that great service, it has been ecumenical. No young woman is deprived access to that school for the only public education of its kind east of Montreal. There is an opportunity here, and as members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus from the area, we met with school board officials. We talked about this $8 to $10 million, and what the officials said is there is no immediate crisis or need for closing that school, that a preventative maintenance and an ongoing maintenance schedule would be fine. What the minister needs to talk to the board about is that any contributions to Holy Angels are not clawed back from other schools in the system. That's one of the concerns that is in the system right now, is that that would be clawed back. And we'd be able to have the type of a dialogue, Mr. Speaker, that we are lacking here, because the minister and her colleagues today voted against a resolution of good faith and partnership that actually voted against a precedence. And I can tell you the member from Cape Breton South would know when we were in government and there were issues, he went to a school board, the member from Glace Bay went to those school board meetings, the member from Cape Breton Nova, Cape Breton Centre went to meetings. For whatever the issue of the day was, we went there as all party, and I and my colleagues sat on one side of the table, and we had to listen, and our colleagues spoke passionately about their areas and the issues that had to be addressed, and we went forward as MLAs from the area. Why the government is refusing a nonpartisan, all-party approach to sit down and really get to the heart of where a solution would be. I would hope that the minister will reflect in caucus with her colleagues and reconsider this, that we can move forward and these young women will have the assurance so that there will be many more Alyssa's in the future to have the Holy Angels experience. Thank you.
Thank you. The time has now expired. We will now rise to sit tomorrow between the hours of 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. The motion is carried. Now we will rise to sit tomorrow.